So it's election season, and what does that mean? That means candidates would like you to vote for them. And one of the races it's the only countywide race, is for Mason County Superior Court judge. One of the people running for that is the guy who's on the call with me now, David Stevens. So, David, thank you for taking some time and talking with us. First off, who is David Stevens?
Well, I was raised in Sacramento, California. My dad supervised the maids at the Holiday Inn. My mother was a waitress. I didn't know what to do after high school. Nobody in my family had gone to college or anything of that nature. My father had been in the Air Force for 23 years, and they encouraged me to look at the military. So I went in, checked out the recruiters. Navy had the best program for me. My father retired after 23 years in the Air Force, and he was an E5. And they said, well, once you finish your schooling, just be about a year and a half, you'll be an E5. I thought that'd be a really good deal. I thought my dad would be impressed. So I went home and I told him, Dad, I've joined the Navy. And after I finish my schooling, I'm going to be an E5. And he wasn't impressed. He said, Navy just gives it away. So after I finished my schooling, I was assigned to the USS Camden AOE-2 that was ported in Bremerton, Washington. So I spent about 4.5 years in Bremerton. Then I went to the University of Washington, got my undergrad there, met my wife there. We've been married going on about 27 years. And then I went into law enforcement for a while. I worked for the Office of Civil Rights, Housing, Urban Development, investigating discrimination. We had to work with attorneys a lot. And so I became interested in going to law school. So I applied to law school, went to the University of Washington School of Law, graduated in 1999. And then after that, I started working as a prosecutor. My wife was from Spokane, so we initially lived there. And then I lived in pretty much Spokane until 2010. Then I ran for prosecutor because I didn't like the prosecutor and the job he was doing. It didn't seem fair to me that if you ended up on my desk, you're looking at maybe going to prison for a long time. But if you landed on the desk of the guy who was in the office next to me, you might get a misdemeanor. And I didn't think the guy was doing the job. Turns out he didn't like me running against him. So he fired me. And then I went and I worked as a federal prosecutor for a while. And then sequestration kicked in. That's when Congress couldn't agree on a budget. So they agreed that when they couldn't agree, that mandatory cuts would happen to the federal government. So despite the fact that the federal prosecutor's office really liked me, and the U.S. attorney wrote me a really nice recommendation, they said, well, Dave, your job's been cut. So I went to Afghanistan for a while, where we taught judges, prosecutors, and if we could find one, defense attorneys. So I learned a lot about the Islamic jurisprudence, how that all works. Very interesting. Then that was winding down in Afghanistan. So then I went to Kosovo, where I was an international prosecutor, did a really big case there. And then I got an offer to come back to Washington as chief criminal prosecutor in Okanogan County, and I did that. And then I got an offer from Mason County, and I told my wife, I said, how would you like it if I made a lot less money? I was much grumpier, and I had to work a lot more. And she says, well, that's not sounding great. And I said, but we'd be in Mason County where our daughter is and our 5 grandkids. We only had 4 grandkids at that time. So we've been here about 3 years. And so that's about the thumbnail sketch of Dave Stevens.
So what are you doing in the prosecutor's office now?
Right now, I'm senior felony prosecutor. So I handle like the last big trial I did was a child rape trial. I do a lot of Class A, a lot of Class B felonies. So those are the rapes, murders, burglaries, or Class Bs, things like that.
So why did you decide that you wanted to be a judge?
I wasn't happy with what I was seeing. Now, I've been doing this more than 20 years, a couple of decades, working in the court systems, both as a public defender and as a prosecutor. I've seen a lot of changes come through the system, and I don't think they're good. I think we've gone to the route where the way it was supposed to work in the late 1970s, there was a huge concern as to whether or not all the defendants were being treated equally. So we came up with the standardized sentencing. That's where you go and you have the seriousness of the offense, murder, rape being way up there, theft in the second degree being way down there, and then the number of points you would have depended on how many prior felonies you might have. And the idea was that everybody would be treated equally. And I understand that goal, and I applaud the goal, but I think we've retreated from that. Now it's more a defendant centric, and we're more worried about the defendants than we are about the community or the victims. So I came to this county, and I started seeing that a lot of defendants who were repeat offenders who had dozens and dozens of prior warrants were being let out without any bail whatsoever. And I don't think our community was being protected. And then there were a couple of cases that came down the line that kind of illustrated this. You might remember Mr. McClure. He's the one that tried to burn down several buildings in Shelton. He'd just been let out. He had a long criminal history, a long warrant history, and he had burglarized the donut shop, which I found personally offensive as somebody who really loves donuts. And then given his history, he was let out, and then he went and he started all those fires. I don't think he should have been let out. I think if you have a lot of warrants, that tells everybody you're unlikely to come back unless we come and get you again, or you commit another offense. And if you've done a lot of other crimes, of course, you're a danger to the community because you're continuing to commit crimes. So, and then he goes and tries to burn things down. And we all know about the Peterson case where she shot her boyfriend multiple times. And I asked for $500,000 bail, which I thought was about appropriate for somebody who shoots somebody multiple times. Judge let her out on 5,000. I was quite concerned, and but I still wasn't thinking about running for judge. But then a whole bunch of people started coming up to me, people I knew in the community, law enforcement officers, and they kept saying somebody needs to run against her. And there's not a lot of attorneys that will do that. For one thing, there's not as many attorneys in Mason County as you would think. And then the pool that would actually run was quite small. So my friends started asking me, would you run? And, you know, I have, like I said, I have grandchildren in this community. I'm quite concerned for their safety. I'm very concerned about community safety overall. So they basically talked, after I talked to my wife, who I thought would say no, because as I said, I'd run for prosecutor, and obviously I didn't win. So I thought, oh, you know, there's no way she's going to let me do this. And she was saying, no, we need to protect this community. You need to run. So that's why I'm running for judge.
So I'm gonna let's look in our crystal ball for a moment here, and you become judge. How is that going to change your relationship with your fellow prosecutors and the defense attorneys and that sort of thing?
Well, you know, I think it's I've actually talked to a lot of the public defenders about it because, you know, we have some downtime in court and we kibitz amongst ourselves about how, you know, things are going and stuff like that. And they all realize, because they deal with me, that because I'd been a public defender myself, I'd been a chief public defender, that I understand their jobs and I get along with them quite well. I actually think I would be tougher on prosecutors than I would be on the defense attorneys, because when you're a public defender, you have to take any case that's assigned to you. You don't get a choice. You're stuck with it. And it, you know, there are some criteria, like whether or not you're qualified to do felonies and things like that. But prosecutors, if the case really turns out where we can't prove things because we don't have the evidence, the witnesses have disappeared, we can move to dismiss those cases. Often we dismiss them without prejudice. So if we ever are able to find those witnesses, we might be able to bring that case back. But public defenders can't do that. So I know both sides of the job. And I think that it's really important that the prosecutors do their job correctly. And actually, that's pretty easy in this county because we do have a really good elected prosecutor, Mike Dorsey, who's actually does cases himself, and he doesn't do the easy cases. He does hard cases, which is unusual. Most elected prosecutors will either have a subordinate actually run the trial, but Mike actually does all the work himself, and he takes, like I said, some of the big cases. So I don't think that would be that tough. But when you become a judge, it's kind of like when you're in the military and you get promoted. You're in the same work center, but now you're in charge and stuff like that. So you can't joke around like you did, no hijinks or anything like that. So it would change the relationship, but basically we have professional relationships anyway. So I think it wouldn't be that hard.
So you brought up some of the more controversial cases that you've been involved in.
Mhm.
Again, putting yourself in the judge seat, how would you approach those types of cases? Those things
Well,
that
what
have the community up in an uproar, and you've got
Mhm.
protesters or whatever is the hot button issue. How are you going
Mhm.
to remain neutral and deal with these controversial issues?
Well, you treat everybody equally and you apply the law, and then you apply it without fear or favor. When I was at the U.S. Attorney's Office, that's actually what the Latin phrase that they have. You have to apply the law without fear or favor. So I treat everybody the same. And if it's a fresh arrest, what we call a preliminary hearing, you look at what the person's warrant history. Are they going to return voluntarily? What's their criminal history? Do they have any criminal history? Does it include violence? Does it include domestic violence? Have they violated no contact orders? Things like that. And then you decide what would be the appropriate measures to make sure that they comply with the court orders.
In situations where maybe your personal beliefs conflict with the established law, would you handle that?
You apply the law. And that's what the oath is. I've taken the oath many times to defend and enforce the U.S. Constitution and its laws and state laws. And you have to do that without, like I said, I keep repeating it, without fear or favor. So you just do that.
With although things are starting to change, but in the past, there's been some restrictions on who can be in the jail. Uh, what was your opinion of trying to help with prison space or jail space?
Well, the interesting thing to me is a lot of our cases are taking way too long to resolve. And if a person is going to be convicted and have to go to the Department of Corrections, once they're actually convicted and sentenced, then it's not on our budget. So it's actually to our benefit to make sure that the cases get resolved in a timely manner, which is not happening now. And this is no secret. Even all the judges have commented on this. And it's very difficult because the attorneys get in there. Um, they want to just kick the can down the road, but it's not good for the defendant. It's not good for the victims. It's not good for the county. It costs us money to keep doing that.
What are your thoughts on alternative sentencings? Sentencings.
Oh, I'm a big proponent of alternative sentencings. I always have been. Uh, we have the drug offender sentencing alternative. There's two versions of that. There's the residential and the prison based, and they're given a lot of resources when they do that. Uh, that's a really good alternative. I like we got the SOSA. That's where sex offender sentencing alternative. That's when it's, and the victims have a lot of input into that. What's really interesting in Mason County that I hadn't seen in any other place I worked is when you're considering these alternatives, you have the Department of Corrections do a recommendation. They get input from the victim, they look at the evidence, the police reports, they talk to the defendant, and then they make a recommendation. In this county, though, the courts don't seem to follow those recommendations. They don't seem to give them much weight. I found that kind of strange because these are the professionals. These would be the people that would be supervising these people. And I've seen a lot of cases in Mason County where the Department of Corrections has said, this person has had a lot of chances before. They've got a long criminal history. They've been offered treatment many, many times in the past, and they didn't think that they would be able to make it through an alternative. And they're prescient. A lot of these people are failing, and that's not good for them. That's not good for anyone. So I'm a big proponent of alternative. There's the first time offender. If you have no felony history, then you can do that instead of doing prison time, and we give you supervision. DOC will give you resources, hook you up with treatment if that's something you need. So yeah, I like those things. I think I like giving people chances. I've had chances in my life. People have helped me out. People have mentored me, things like that. I think those are important things, and I like to utilize them.
And David, to wrap this thing up, I want you to give us your elevator speak on why to vote for you.
Experience. So I've been doing this for about 23 years, and mostly I've been doing it in courtrooms, day in, day out. Mostly I've done criminal. I've done other things too. I have done civil matters. I have even done dissolutions, things like that. Hasn't been a huge part of my career. I actually like doing jury trials. Most prosecutors, defense attorneys don't like doing those. They're a lot of hard work. It can be heartbreaking whether you're a defense attorney or a prosecutor when the case doesn't come out the way you want. But I think that's the bedrock of our system. I've actually prosecuted in Europe where they have the civil system. You don't have a jury. You'll have one judge if it's like a misdemeanor, and you'll have three judges if it's a felony. And those systems are quite different. You don't have all the rights to confront witnesses. You don't have double jeopardy. We have the best criminal system in the entire world. Ours is the envy of the world. Even our system evolved from the common law system in England. England doesn't even have the protections that we still have in our system. Now, a lot of people see that as a problem because that, you never know what a jury's going to do. But I think it's actually important that the community is participating in the criminal justice system by way of jury. So I've always really liked that. I'm a kind of guy that likes puzzles. So I like figuring out how things work, how they work together, how to put them together. That's why one of my hobbies is restoring classic Volkswagens, because they're like giant German puzzles. So they can be infuriating, but they're a lot of fun to work on. So that's what I enjoy, and I think people will appreciate the thought that I'll put into it because I have all the experience.
Okay, David Stevens, one of the candidates for Mason County Superior Court Judge. Thank you for taking some time.
Thank you.